From phantoms drifting between pews and hooded figures lurking among gravestones to church organs playing on their own. These are 5 of the most haunted churches in England. I'm your host, Severed Soul. At the edge of Dartmoor, a black hearse drawn by headless horses barrels through the night. Its driver, none other than the damned spirit of Sir Francis Drake. This is the haunting of Buckland Abbey. In the wild, windswept moorlands of Dartmoor, far in the southwest of England, the line between legend and reality blurs. Here, the mist creeps low to the ground, curling through twisted trees and over crumbling stones, and when night falls, they say anything can rise from the shadows. Buckland Abbey is the ancient home of Sir Francis Drake, pirate, explorer, and some whisper, a man who made a dark pact with none other than El Diablo himself. Sir Francis Drake is remembered in history books as a hero, the first Englishman to sail around the world, knighted by Queen Elizabeth I, and a key figure in defeating the mighty Spanish Armada. But in the wild tales passed down through Dartmoor's villages, his victories came not just from skill or bravery, but possibly from something far more sinister. So the locals strongly believed that Drake's seemingly impossible feats, which included his lightning-fast rebuilding of Buckland Abbey and his naval triumphs, were only possible because he'd sold his soul. As a result of said sale of said soul, it's speculated that when he died, his spirit was never granted peace. No, the stories say he was cursed, doomed to forever drive a black hearse drawn by horses, not just any old stallions. These are headless horses, racing through the night. And if that's not scary enough to make you wet your pants, maybe the pack of chattering goblins and baying devil hounds are. Those who have walked the grounds of Buckland Abbey after dark speak of hearing the rumble of carriage wheels on empty roads, the snap of ghostly reins, the shriek of hounds whose cries can kill any living dog that hears them. And if you dare to linger, you might just get a peek of that ominous black hearse surging through the mist, with Sir Francis Drake himself at the reins, his face pale as bone, his eyes burning with eternal fury. Sounds pretty scary to me. But perhaps the most unsettling element of this spooky local legend is Drake's drum. This is his most prized possession, carried on every expedition and returned to Buckland Abbey after his death. It's said that the drum holds Drake's spirit, and when England faces its darkest hours, the drum starts beating on its own, summoning his ghostly apparition back from the grave. They say it beat during the Napoleonic Wars. They even say it beat during both World Wars. And they say, when the time comes again, Drake's drum will summon his ghost to defend his homeland once more. Even now, visitors to the Abbey walk its ancient halls with a mixture of awe and dread, wondering if they'll hear the faint tap of the drum, or worse, find themselves face to face with the cursed knight himself, thundering towards them out of the darkness. Whether you believe in Drake's ghost, ghastly goblins, and devilish hellhounds, one thing is certain. Buckland Abbey remains a place where history and myth are entwined, where every beat of a drum or creak of a floorboard might just be a foretelling of ominous doom. So if you ever find yourself in Dartmoor after nightfall, listen carefully, because you might just hear the beat of that distant drum, or the thunder of hooves closing in fast behind you. And if you're unlucky, you might come face to face with the entity of Sir Francis Drake himself. Let me know what you think in the comments. Is Buckland Abbey really haunted by the phantom of Sir Francis Drake? Have you had any spooky encounters at the Abbey? I'd love to hear your stories. Ghostly arsonists, apparitions watching from the pews, and whispering phantoms. This isn't just a cathedral. It's a place built on foundations of blood, betrayal, and unfinished business. This is the haunting of York Minster. Standing proud in Deangate, York, one of the most breathtaking and terrifying places in Northern Europe, this towering Gothic masterpiece was built atop a Roman fortress dating back to 71 AD. The 6th and 9th Roman legions once called this place home, and their presence still lingers in the dark beneath your feet. Today, if you descend into the Minster's undercroft, you can still see the remains of that ancient fort. Artifacts of a forgotten age whisper stories of battle and conquest. York itself later fell into Viking hands. They renamed it Jorvik and left their mark forever. One Viking lord, Ulf, even gifted the Minster a treasure, a 1,000-year-old carved elephant tusk, the horn of Ulf, still resting within these sacred walls. History hangs pretty heavy here, but so does tragedy. York Minster has been ravaged by fire again and again. 1753, 1829, 1840, and more recently, 1984. The worst of the fires all began with one man, a man called Jonathan Martin. Driven by voices he claimed were from God, though I'd say he probably did have voices in his head telling him what to do. I'm not entirely convinced it was God. Anyway, Jonathan hid inside the cathedral after dark, stripped himself bare, piled wood and holy books, and set the night ablaze. Declared mad, Jonathan escaped the gallows, but it seems that when he did eventually die, his spirit became bound to the Abbey. To this day, people claim to see him, still trying to complete his fiery mission, still naked. However, Jonathan, our resident arsonist, isn't the only restless soul here. Senior clergy Dean Gale, a man much beloved in his time, died tragically young at just 26 years old in 1702. But even in death, he refuses to abandon his post. Witnesses claim to have seen his ghost, quietly listening to sermons that echo through the centuries. And then, there's the encounter that chills even the skeptics. In the 1820s, two women separated from their group wandered the silent halls of the Minster. From the shadows, a man in a naval uniform approached. As he passed, he whispered something into one woman's ear, something that chilled her to her core. Because it turns out, this ghostly apparition was indeed the woman's very own brother. Her dead brother. So apparently, years before this spooky encounter, the brother and sister made a pact. The first to die would return with news of the afterlife, and it seems he had kept his promise. But no one knows what terrible truth he whispered that night. Why he chose to appear there and then isn't very clear. Maybe the Abbey was a place they frequented together often. Nobody quite knows. But one thing is for sure. York Minster stands waiting. A monument to beauty, history, and restless spirits. So, when you step inside, be respectful, and just remember, the living and the dead walk these centuries-old halls together. The ghost of a servant girl, a wicked lord, and a pregnant bride. Prepare for a story of tragedy and betrayal. Welcome to Annesley. This is the haunting of Annesley Old Church and Hall. Somewhere off the beaten path in Nottinghamshire lies a ruin very few people talk about, a forgotten place where ivy claws at ancient stone and the silence is palpable. Fires, duels, heartbreak, and the dead who simply refuse to leave. At first glance, it's just a crumbling shell on a grassy mound, surrounded by wind-blown trees and the wildflowers of a long-forgotten graveyard. But if you linger here after dark, if you dare walk those crooked rows of moss-covered headstones, you'll soon understand why locals don't visit this place alone. The church was built back in 1356 by the powerful Annesley family, but before that, a Norman church stood on the same spot. Today, the building itself is in ruins, but the energy here is anything but gone. The graveyard is the resting place of plague victims, and perhaps not all of them are truly at rest. There have been sightings of a dark figure, a monk dressed in dense black robes, silently passing between the stones. Now, the thing is, no monastery ever stood here, but there were practicing monks at Newstead Abbey just down the road. So maybe our spectral friend could be making his way from there, centuries later. Who knows? Annesley Hall looms just beyond the churchyard, partially hidden by trees. It's private property now, abandoned, ravaged by fire, and empty. Well, in the physical sense, at least. Built in the 13th century, this once grand manor passed from the Annesleys to the Chorworths when heiress Alice Annesley married George Chorworth in the 1400s. The Chorworth Musters family held the estate for generations, and some say they still hold claim to the property, even in death. This is the place where Lord Byron, long before the fame, used to roam as a boy. And here, on the nearby Diadem Hill, he met his first great love, Mary Chorworth. However, their love was doomed. A family feud raged after Byron's uncle, known simply as the Wicked Lord, killed a Chorworth in a duel just outside the house. After overhearing Mary confiding in a friend that she'd never marry him, Byron left, shattered and utterly heartbroken. And Mary, well, she went on to marry another man. Neither were happy, and yet their ghosts have both been seen, wandering the same ground where their tragic story began. Lovers torn apart by blood and pride, endlessly searching for what might have been. Inside the hall, the activity is chilling. The Blue Room, once Byron's bedroom, has a nasty reputation. Visitors report being pushed by invisible hands, scratched, and in some cases, even burned. In the library, unexplained cigar smoke hangs in the air. Whispers drift from empty corners, and near the fireplace, the ghost of a pregnant woman has been seen holding a baby. In the 1940s, her bones were discovered beneath the hall, dated back to the 1600s. She hadn't been buried, she'd been hidden. Mary's son, Charles Musters, also lingers here, having died of malaria while sailing with Charles Darwin. His ghost has been known to throw stones and objects at guests. And deep beneath the hall, Byron's murderous uncle, the Wicked Lord, is said to haunt the cellar, still bitter, still violent. The Mews are watched over by a servant girl who took her own life centuries ago after enduring abuse at the hands of a man. Maybe the Wicked Lord. Her shadowy figure is often seen staring out of the windows, waiting, watching, hoping he never returns. There's even a story of a woman sitting on the edge of an old well. Some say they've seen her rise up from within the well. Others, just her silhouette, still, cold, and staring. And then there's the road. A motorist once reported a shadowy figure stepping directly in front of her car. Swirling dress, but no face. On the brink of collision, the figure vanished. The driver ran red lights to escape, too terrified to stop. Paranormal investigators have explored the church and hall for years, even during its abandonment. Some whisper of witchcraft, others just call it folklore. But the energy here, the heavy, silent weight that presses on your chest, that is real. This place has a memory, a pulse, and though time has torn it down, the stories never left. So if you do visit Annesley, be quiet, be respectful, and whatever you do, don't turn your back on that well. An abandoned church, black magic rituals, a cursed priest, and restless souls. Welcome to Clophill, where hooded figures move between gravestones and footsteps are often heard in empty rooms. This is the haunting of St Mary's Church. Mention the village of Clophill to anyone in Bedfordshire or Hertfordshire, and you'll see a knowing, uneasy smile. Not because of the quaint cottages or rolling hills, no. Clophill is famous for something far darker. Perched on a lonely hill overlooking the village stands the ruins of St Mary the Virgin Church, a building that hasn't simply been abandoned, it's been forsaken. Its decline began slowly. In the 1840s, the congregation moved to a new church in the village, and by the 1950s, the old St Mary's was little more than a crumbling shell. Then, during the harsh winter of 1962 and 1963, one of the coldest winters on record, something happened that would change Clophill forever. In March 1963, under a heavy blanket of snow, a group of individuals made their way across frozen fields to the abandoned church. What they performed that night was no childish prank. It was an act of necromancy. They broke open the grave of Jenny Humberstone, a young woman who had been dead for nearly 2 centuries. Her skull was impaled on a spike. Her bones were arranged in a chilling circular pattern around a makeshift stone altar. Symbols, some ancient, some invented, were scrawled on the walls. A cockerel was sacrificed, its blood spilled into the snow. The scene was discovered by 2 local boys the following day, and what they saw would haunt the village for generations. Newspapers branded it a black mass, and Clophill became a national sensation almost overnight. Occultists, thrill seekers, and ghost hunters swarmed to the site, drawn by the lure of darkness. But for Reverend Lewis Barker, the village rector, the horror was only just beginning. Barker, a deeply religious and sensitive man, felt that the very land had been tainted. Shortly after the desecration, he suffered personal tragedy. His young daughter was struck and killed by a car in nearby Shefford. His health began to deteriorate rapidly, and he became convinced that dark forces were stalking him. He tried to rebury Jenny Humberstone's bones multiple times, but each attempt was sabotaged. Desecrations continued. Symbols reappeared. Graves were disturbed again and again. In desperation, Barker hid the bones away, locking them in the boot of his car, hoping to sever whatever connections had been made. But this didn't work. On Halloween of 1969, Barker fled Clophill Rectory in fear, retreating to an isolated cottage near Hitchin. For a while he felt safe, until one icy December morning he woke to find ceremonial stones and buried effigies outside his door. A message, clear and terrifying: "You cannot escape us." He confessed to friends living with him that the witches were still after him, and that he still possessed the bones that had cursed him. Imagine living with the knowledge that somewhere, someone, or something was watching you, waiting. Even decades later, stories of strange sightings continue to swirl around Clophill's old church. Visitors report hooded figures moving between the gravestones, a monstrous towering shadow that stalks the ruins, disembodied whispers calling out from the darkness, and footsteps crunching on gravel when nobody is there. Even police officers assigned to watch the site at night have refused to laugh off these tales, many claiming to have had chilling experiences of their own. Some say the hauntings are the result of decades of fear and imagination. Others believe something was truly unleashed that night in 1963. Something that never left. The haunting sound of a church organ playing on its own at night. The terrifying sight of ghostly figures drifting between pews. And the chilling apparition of a woman in a nearby river. This is no ordinary parish church. This is the haunting of the Holy Trinity Church. Dating back to the 13th century, Holy Trinity is world famous as the final resting place of William Shakespeare. Visitors travel from every corner of the globe to stand beside his grave, but some say he never truly left. In the quiet of the chancel, where Shakespeare lies beneath the stone floor, a ghostly figure is often seen, translucent, male, alone. He stands in silence, sometimes moving his hand as if writing in the air, deep in thought. Those who witness it say it looks just like him, the bard himself, trapped in the echo of unfinished words. And then there are the whispers, snippets of Shakespearean verse, spoken where no one else is there, heard by ears that can't quite believe it. Lines from Hamlet, Macbeth, The Tempest, recited in a voice too soft to place, too real to deny. But the most heart-wrenching presence is that of a woman. She's been seen wandering the churchyard at dusk, clothed in Tudor-era dress, her steps hesitant, her gaze distant. Locals believe it's Anne Hathaway, Shakespeare's very own wife, forever searching for her lost husband, drawn back to the place where he was laid to rest. Inside the church, strange things are said to happen. Sudden cold spots grip visitors like a vice, especially near the altar. Some say it feels like somebody is watching, standing just behind them. The organ, long silent at night, has played on its own, soft, sorrowful tones echoing through the darkness, only to fall silent when someone comes to check. Nobody is ever there. The keys never even move. Figures have been seen drifting between the pews. People try to approach them, but the shadows simply vanish, melting into the air like smoke. Some who snap photos capture orbs, strange lights, or even pale faces hovering behind them in the frame. Nothing they saw in the moment, only when they look later. But perhaps the most chilling story tied to Holy Trinity isn't from centuries past. It happened in 1954. A woman named Olive had gone out for the evening and never came home. Days later, her body was found in the River Avon, just steps from the church. A woolen scarf had been tied around her neck and secured to a heavy tombstone, one stolen from the graveyard and dragged into the water to keep her down. Her tragic murder was never solved. Since then, she's been seen, pale and still, standing waist deep in the river near the church, her soaked scarf twisted tight around her neck, eyes open, watching. This place is full of memory. Holy Trinity is more than just Shakespeare's resting place. It's a crossroads of history, tragedy, and something entirely unexplainable. The church holds its beauty in the daylight, but when the sun sets and the mist creeps over the river, that beauty turns cold. So if you visit, be respectful, watch the pews, listen for the whispers, and whatever you do, if you hear someone behind you reciting a line of poetry, don't turn around.